Hey guys, so let's talk about the 5 main body types. So if you're completely new here, I'm happy that you're here, and I think this system is really going to help you to understand why certain things look the way that they do on you, and really help you sort of dress more intentionally and build the style that you really want to build. So let's get right into the body types. So these body types are based on the 5 main bone structures, and this is why this system is so special. It's because everything, the shape of your body, your facial features, everything about that, the soft aspects of your body are on your bone structure. That's what's going to determine the lines that your flesh takes, because your bone structure is really the foundation of the lines of your body. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So if you've ever wondered, for example, why do I look like a child when I try to go to a job interview? Or why do I look weird in this? Or, why, even though I have an hourglass shape, something looks off about this when I dress for my hourglass, as they would tell you, then you are definitely in the right place. So let's get right into it, and I'm going to talk about the 5 main bone structures. So we're talking about facial bone structure as well as skeletal bone structure. So the first type is the sharpened bone structure. So these people have very long, narrow bones and very sharp bones as well. And they have a longer vertical line to them, so they might look quite tall. And again, these are just tendencies. These are not absolutes. So if you don't have one of these characteristics or another, then don't worry about it. Think about the overall effect. And the facial bone structure is the same way. They have pretty angular bones and pretty sharp bones and pretty long lines to their bones. And you can see that some ladies with this bone structure have a bit of a straighter figure, and some ladies with this bone structure could have a bit of a curvy figure, and some are in the middle. And some have more lush facial features and some have more taut facial features. And they can make alterations to the lines, to those longer lines, the longer clean lines, based on that. But their base is always, because the base is the bone structure, the base of the lines is always a long clean line. And you can have it be a bit softer and more rounded. If you have some rounded facial features and a rounded figure, then you can round those longer lines a little bit, and you'll have some longer ovals to your shape, maybe some softer fabrics. And if you have a more straight or moderate figure and some taut facial features, but you still have the same skeleton, then you can go for those clean, long lines, maybe in some stiffer fabrics. So you can make alterations to this base set of lines, which is long, clean lines, based on just how soft your facial features are, how soft your figure is or not, and you can tailor it to yourself. So that is the first bone structure, which is the sharpened bone structure. The next one is beveled. So if you don't know what beveled is, it's actually something like this. It's a sort of a blunted angle in a way, and this is the shape. And it's basically also a longer bone, and again, it's just as important that it's long, and it's sometimes a little bit of width. It kind of softens the bone structure a little bit, and the angles of the bone structure are also a little bit softened, and that's why they're beveled, but they still have quite a lot of structure to the bones. And remember, with both of these types, the sharpened and the beveled type, it's very important to remember that the bones are long, and this is really going to be the key for both of these bone structures, and that's what they have in common. But anyway, beveled has a bit more softness to it in a way, and therefore a little bit more width. These people might have some width to their shoulders, maybe some width to their hands, some width and length to the bone structure that they have in general. And their facial bone structure might also have those blunt angles as well, those beveled angles, and that's what this bone structure is categorized by. Because they have both the length and a touch of width and some beveled angles to their bone structure, structure, then they are going to look amazing in some wider silhouettes that are a bit more unconstructed and some longer lines to go with their longer bones. So we always want to work in harmony with the body, right? In harmony with the bone structure. And of course, if they have a little bit more, let's say, sharpness to their bone structure, they might find that they look even better with some, on top of that long unconstructed base that they have as a beveled type, they can add a little bit more heavier fabrics, for example, and some even longer lines, taking from a little bit of that sharpness from the sharpened bone structure. Or if they find that they have primarily beveled bones, but they have a softer figure and maybe some lush facial features, then they might want to take their unconstructed long lines of their bone structure and add a little bit more lightweight fabric, some more sort of draping to that, and sort of soften it in that way. But still, we start with the base of the bone structure because that is what everything sits on. So it's all about the bone structure. Next up, we have the rounded bone structure. So rounded bone structure, very important to remember that this bone structure is also short. Bones are shorter, so they might have short arms and legs, short hands and feet, some rounded shapes to the bone structure itself of their face and things like that. And in this case, if we add some softness onto this rounded bone structure, basically nothing happens because we already have a rounded bone structure. If we add softness, we're just adding more of the same. So if we add a figure, more of a voluptuous figure on top of already a bone structure that has rounded shapes and rounded lines, we just add more rounded shapes and rounded lines. So it doesn't really change anything. So in that case, it's still the same. So these ladies look amazing in some lightweight fabrics, some waist emphasis, and really quite fitted, because you have to remember that their bone structure can't really handle a lot of weight added to it because their bones are pretty small and pretty short. So whenever they wear anything that has visual weight, either if it's very textured hair or anything that's too baggy or loose, then that is really going to drag them down and just make them look even a tiny bit frumpy sometimes. But if they wear their own lines to go with the lines of their bodies, so we're talking about small rounded shapes that are pretty fitted because their bones are shorter and sometimes smaller bones as well. So in that case, we really want to have that fittedness there. And at the same time, we want to leave space for some rounded shapes as well in their silhouette overall, and we want to focus on shorter line. But if we add some sharpness to the skeleton, you might find you want some of that sharpness that comes from the sharp body type to sort of play into the lines of what you're wearing overall. So you might want some sharp waist emphasis, you might want some fittedness at the cuffs that's quite sharp, and things like that. So now we have the next type, which is the mixed bone structure. So the mixed bone structure is what it sounds like. So it's a mixing of the types of bone structures. So you could have, for example, some of your bone structure comes from the more rounded bone structure types, and some of your bone structure comes from the sharpened or the beveled bone structure types. So this is sort of like a mix of opposites, right? So it's kind of like a salad. It's kind of like just different elements together. So these people could be anything. They could have longer arms, they could have shorter arms, they could have some angular noses, but then at the same time they look short, and it could be anything. So it could be just a completely random mixture, right? And because they have a mixture, we want to have shorter lines for them, because by the time the eye goes from one thing to the next, it's already changed. because it's all a mixture. So we want to have shorter lines for them, and they have the shortest lines of all the types. And we also want to mimic that mixture of opposites in their bone structure by adding some mixture of opposites in their overall look. So we're thinking about some color blocking, we're thinking about some different lines and things like that. And we also want to have their look be quite fitted, because we really need to be able to define all of the different aspects of their bone structure because they have that mix. You can also have a mixed bone structure that has a little bit of a straighter figure. So in that case, you might want to do some more, these ladies look amazing in some more boxy, short shapes with some stiffer fabrics. So they have the shorter lines again because they have the mixture of opposites, but then they have the stiffer fabrics because their flesh is a little bit more taut. If your flesh is sort of a mixture of opposites as well, you might feel like you don't really want to alter the recommendations because your flesh is just like your bone structure, and your facial features are just like your bone structure, all pretty mixed. So you might just want to go for some pretty fitted looks and a lot of animation to the look, because there's a lot of mixture of opposites. There's a lot going on with the angles and the lines of your body type and your bone structure. So you want to mimic that in your outfit, and that's going to look really chic on you. And if you have a little bit more softness on this mixed bone structure, then you might find that you want to add a little bit of softness to your fabrics and a little bit of rounded shapes, because that softness to your figure and the softness to your facial features adds some rounded shapes. It kind of pads the bone structure, right? Just like with all the other types. So it does that, so you want to sort of go with those shapes, but still remember that you have that mixed bone structure underneath there, and to honor that. And finally, last but not least, we have the blended type. So the blended type is kind of the opposite, but at the same time similar to the mixed type. So the blended type, it's like taking all of our ingredients, and instead of making a fruit salad, we make a fruit smoothie. So we blend it all together. So it's the blended type. So the blended type is all about not really being, everything is sort of like the arms and legs are not too long or too short in general. The bones in general are not too rounded, they're not too angular, they're not too sharp, they're not too structured, but they're also not too small, and it's just all pretty much in the middle. It's pretty moderate. So that's the blended type. When we take this mixture of opposites and we blend it, we get the sort of a more moderate bone structure without really too many angles or anything like that. And these ladies look amazing in some smoother lines and some minimal detail because they have pretty smooth lines to their bone structure. Again, it's not too rounded and it's not too angular, so it's in the middle. It's a pretty smooth line. It's not angular, but it's not rounded. So we want to just honor that and mimic those smoother lines in their silhouette. And we also really like the minimal detail because there isn't really a lot going on with their bone structure. And with this blended bone structure, you can add a little bit of some bevel shapes or some sharp shapes to the bone structure, and that would mean that you also want to add a little bit of maybe some stiffer fabrics, maybe a little bit of longer lines and things like that, maybe some v-necks to your silhouette if you have a little bit more sharpness to you. But if you have a blended bone structure and you have a little bit more softness to your figure, then you might feel like you might want to again take your clean lines and your clean and moderate length lines and just add a little bit of lightweight fabrics, maybe some softness there, maybe with a little bit of some rounded lines, maybe some waist emphasis, things like that, because you have some softer facial features, maybe a bit of a shapely figure, but still, since it sits on a blended skeleton and a blended facial bone structure, then you still have your basis of the clean lines. So that is the blended bone structure. So that is it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I will leave some links to some other videos you could watch on this system down below, some more information on it and things like that. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I am looking forward to making some more videos on this system. So if you enjoy this, then please subscribe and make sure that you are subscribed, and I will have more videos on this coming up for sure. So thank you for watching. Leave me a comment with your thoughts, and I will talk to you next time. Okay, bye.